This video is sponsored by TinkerTurf. Hey Wargamers, today I wanted to crack into a question sent in by a viewer because, man, I think it is incredibly interesting, but also very simple. So here it is, are you ready? What do the different forms of Duardin, or dwarves, yeah, it's the GW name, think of one another? Right? So we have Kharadron Overlords, we have Dispossessed, and we have Fire Slayers right now are the main Duardin types that we have. We know they have a long lineage, and they have a lot in common, right? Much more, I would say, than, say, the elf variants, right? Where the Deepkin are their own thing, the Daughters of Cain, they're radically different in how they live. But even though the elves are so distinctly different, it doesn't mean that the Duardin races are like homogenous or too samey, because they come from wildly diverse backgrounds with different values and cultural influences. So for this discussion, I'm going to break down the Duardin into three little subtypes like I mentioned before: KO, Fire Slayers, and Dispossessed. And what I'm going to do is take a look from each of their perspectives at the other two, and then we're going to have a discussion about why I love this race so much within the context of Age of Sigmar. In fact, it's probably one of the armies that I love the most, if I'm being real with you, because I like the aesthetics of all of them. So let's start with the Dispossessed. These are the Duardin found in the cities of Sigmar Battletome, and while they don't have a faction of their own, which is a shame by the way, they are a vital ingredient in Sigmar's mission to reclaim the realms. You see, their engineering prowess and their mastery of cannons and defenses are a huge boon to the forces of order. Now their timeline goes kind of as follows. Sigmar sounded the retreat to Azyr towards the end of the Age of Myth. Some Duardin keeps were already in Azyr, of course, but many more flocked that way. Whichever Duardin clans made it in, they then had hundreds of years to grow, to develop, to mingle with other Duardin and with other human and elven survivors. When they enter the realms, or, defend a city of Sigmar that already exists, their worldview is wildly different than the other two Duardin factions we're going to talk about. You see, they were safe, relatively, during the Age of Chaos. Sigmar, the God King, drew a line in the sand that Chaos could not cross. That is, he shut the gates of Azyr. And they had centuries to prepare and integrate and share culture and knowledge with other people within the cities of Sigmar banner. And while there's always going to be some kind of species-based tension, dwarves kind of scoff at elves and that kind of stuff, these Duardin are much more team players than the classic dwarves of the past. The ones specifically that come, from Azyr, or at least descended from that, relative to other survivors in the realms, they come from money, right? Stable societies back in Azyr. Often the rich will fund expeditions into the realms in hopes of claiming valuable territory. So as far as their worldview goes, they are pretty positive. They are the people whose worldview is about safety and being prepared, and now they're venturing into the realms. They have funds, war resources, and a god who has, or at least at some point had, their back in Sigmar. And whether they are out for conquest or defending an existing city, at some point they have a prosperous society that they do fit into. Again, teamwork makes the dream work. There's not much info here about grudges or anything like that, but they do still carry the same notion of honor, and your word is your bond that their forefathers had. Now, with this kind of background, when they look at Fire Slayers, again, I want to be very clear, I'm making sweeping generalizations about these things. If you write one of these characters for, say, your Soulbound character, you can do whatever you want. I'm just taking the broad strokes here. When these guys look at Fire Slayers, I imagine a few things run across their minds. These guys are crazy zealots, and you know what? They'd be absolutely right. But they're also expert craftsmen, and that could be something that could bridge the gap to discussion. I'm sure they'd feel a lot of kindred spirit if they bumped into a lodge. There's Duardin Ale, there's, braggadocious stories about their heroes, hyping up of the family lineage, and all these things they can agree upon. It's when the Fire Slayers turn into glowing hot pockets and scream about their broken god, that the dinner table might get a bit awkward. Again, Fire Slayers are generally speaking more isolated as communities, and so they've evolved differently. They're very self-dependent, but self-dependent in a way that also somehow relies on Grimnir. Like, they have this independence that is solely focused on a deity. It's a religious patriarchy, which is vastly different from the more traditional systems of government and that kind of stuff than the Dispossessed would be used to. So there might be friction or confusion about how certain aspects of their society just function. As for the Kharadron Overlords, it's a real mixed bag, to be perfectly honest with you. I can definitely see them respecting each other for adapting to whatever they need to do to survive. For the Dispossessed, it was a more open approach to collaboration and giving up their keeps to run to Azir when Sigmar sounded the alarm. But for the KO, they went the other way. They went insular, right? Trusting no one but themselves. Again, I think things like engineering and weapon crafting would be a great, thing to bond over, but I think the line will be drawn when it comes to the monetary-based culture and worldview of the Kharadron Overlords. We'll explore that in just a bit. All in all, I think the Dispossessed make a fantastic middle between Fire Slayers and KO. That's actually why I wanted to start there. There's great reasons that they would get along with the other two, and that's why I kind of consider them more of a neutral point. Because they are different, but there's enough cultural similarities that they can probably work together and get along. But now we're going to talk about the ends of the spectrum, okay? Let's talk about Fire Slayers first. Fire-themed, nearly naked zealots that are an all-consuming hunt for their shattered god Grimnir. They are largely very isolated as lodges, keeping to themselves. They also have varying degrees of morality when it comes to who they do business with. Some going as so far as to sell their services to Chaos Lords in exchange for Urgold. And just highlighting those few things is enough to really point out the cultural differences and how their worldviews are fundamentally different. You see, when you look at a dispossessed Duardin, from a city of Sigmar, he has a job to do most likely. It's probably defending the city or, maintaining the cannon, something like that. When you look at a Fire Slayer, I'm sure they have a job as well, but they also have this secret mission built in, and that is obtain all the Urgold, and that mission is more important than any form of morality. So when a Fire Slayer looks at a Dispossessed, they likely see a lesser, but not hostile, version of themselves. You don't have the stones to follow Grimnir. Your people didn't trust his flames, and they ran and hid in Azir. You can call us zealots, but the fire of Grimnir kept us alive and thriving during the Age of Chaos. I'm sure there would be some derogatory looks made about how the Dispossessed have so thoroughly mingled the Duardin culture with that of humans and elves, and maybe they wouldn't be seen as true Duardin because they aren't isolated in these deep keeps and that kind of thing, or seen as self-sufficient. As for the Kharadron Overlords, one concept creates a massive rift between them, and that is the gods. You see, the Kharadron Overlord view is fundamentally based on the idea that even though they know gods exist, screw those guys, right? They didn't help the Kharadron Overlords during the Age of Chaos, and you, meaning whoever they're talking to, in this case Fire Slayers, should not wait for them to help you too. So what is an attitude and worldview that is wholly focused on revering and pursuing Grimnir? Think of that. Everything from their appearance, their power, their treasure, their form of government, it's all wrapped up in their god. And here's these other dwarves that aren't just neutral to Grimnir, like say the Dispossessed would be, but actively see the life goals of the Fire Slayers as foolishness, right? The Kharadron Overlords think that they are fools. I'm sure they can get along to do trade and stuff, but culturally, that's a huge rift, just because of the sheer intensity of Fire Slayer devotion. Now, lastly are the Kharadron Overlords themselves, and at this point I've talked about them a bit, but most importantly to their history and their worldview is their founding, where they lost everything in Shaman and escaped to the sky on these crude airships. Grugni didn't help them, right? None of the gods came to save them despite all of their prayers. These are people who believe in doing it yourself because no one's going to help you. Everything is merit-based, and ingenuity, whether on a ship or through running a business, is how value and success are measured. In fact, monetary earnings are the equivalent of a good name, like a good title of like, oh, that's an honest guy. That's a guy who keeps his word. That's how you measure stuff, is through monetary gain. It's how you garner fame, fortune, and authority. So when it comes to the Fire Slayers, there's obviously a rift regarding religion that we mentioned, and I won't rehash it, but in addition to that, a merit-based society is going to struggle with a patriarchy, a lineage-based one like the Fire Slayers. All it takes is for one Volkite Berserker to mention something about their rune father, and for a Carriage and Overlord Arcanaut Company guy to be like, why follow him? What's he ever done? And you can easily see how that would be taken as an insult, where one is looking for the validation, right? What has the rune father done for your society, and how has he earned that position, from the mind of the Carriage and Overlord? But then from the Fire Slayer, he's like, how dare you insult my rune father like that? He is the patriarch. And this kind of tension can go back and forth, right? You flying dwarves don't respect the chain of command, you don't respect family or religious leaders, and you can see firing back. Well, you follow leaders that haven't earned the right to lead. It's just some dude's kid. Both are right, and it's just how these two cultures interact. And as far as how the Carriage and Overlords think about the Dispossessed, I'll be honest, I can't think of much when it comes to them, right? Outside of them kind of viewing them as like familiar cousins or customers, that kind of thing. But honestly, if the Carriage and Overlords keep trade happening, I don't see a whole lot to ruffle the feathers of the Dispossessed in the same way that, say, the Fire Slayers could, barring any really shady deals or fine print in the contracts, which the Carriage and Overlords are prone to do. So let's take a quick look at why this is so cool, right? And such an interesting thing within the context of the Mortal Realms as we understand it. And we're going to talk more about that real quick after a fast word from our sponsor. So today I wanted to talk to you about TinkerTurf. TinkerTurf is an incredible company that's been lowering the barrier to entry into this hobby since about 2018 with the launch of their TinkerTurf terrain set. Simply put, these are innovative little modular terrain systems that kind of snap together like Legos, and they allow you to create some incredible landscapes, but they come in these very cool sci-fi themed kits that I think you're going to love. They asked me to shout out to a Kickstarter they have going right now with some very unique designs that I wanted to show off. One of the pieces, I'm actually going to show it to you right now. This is the SATCOM array. Now, let me tell you a real life story about why I'm so excited about this. It has to do with the structure's height. You see, back in Seattle, I was actually playing on TinkerTurf terrain unknowingly at a local game store. The store owned it. And we're playing Necromunda, and this one Gene Stealer cult player thought he'd be real dodgy, and he got up on top of what is essentially this. I'll show the picture here. It's the maglev like station. And he got up there and he was like taking pot shots at us, but none of us could really reach him. So round 3, I'm like, forget this, and I turned everything and shot at him. Now, I couldn't actually hurt him, but there were enough shots to make him fall. And when he fell from that height, he landed on the ground, which in Necromunda terms, basically in terms of damage, he took like a last gun, like a cannon shot to the face is basically how the damage panned out, but he survived. And all of us were cheering and screaming and having a wonderful time whooping and hollering about it. It was just the coolest thing. But the reason that story is so significant to me is because it's a perfect visualization of why these kinds of terrain sets matter. In addition to the SATCOM array, they have a few things here I'm going to read them off here. They have the perimeter walls, including a rad guard tower and a door that actually opens. I love that one. Of course, I mentioned obviously the train station, but they have a new train set with tracks, so you can actually have that kind of cutting and dissecting your battlefield for cover and stuff. All of it's modular and it works with all of their existing terrain products. So if you would please head on over after this video is done to the link in the description down below, check out their Kickstarter, support these guys, support small businesses who make this hobby so rewarding for us. Thank you for listening, and now let's get back to the video. So why is this so cool, right? The sheer diversity of a race without any need for magic or mutation. Their differences are based upon worldviews that have very logical reasons for how they came about. They have reasons for evolving the way that they did, but in that the seeds of conflict can be born. You ran and hid. No, I chose to survive. You chose not to fight. Yeah, but you choose to fight for the wrong side, hurling threats back at the Fire Slayers. The KO could say, you're zealots blinded by zeal. And the Fire Slayers can say, yeah, but we never left our post. We didn't run to Azir or the skies. And it's like all of these incredibly pragmatic and very understandable perspectives wrestling with one another, because Duardin are so set in their ways that it's hard to empathize with one another. And so all of them are right, but in a sense, kind of wrong, right? These are all valid negatives to each one, and that's what trips them up. And I absolutely love this. This is the kind of stuff, like, it's the kind of character things and life that factions are made of. It's something I really enjoyed back in the old world where, elves had this internal struggle that boiled into a civil war. And that's the Sundering series, if you're curious, from the old world. But it really does paint a picture of how you can have such diverse groups of people, all, very dedicated to their own beliefs, and how that, even though they're united in a species sense, how it creates this tension and you get cultures that are vastly different. So friends, those are my thoughts based on Black Library novels and the blurbs we get from battle tomes, but it really comes down to their radically different upbringings. Your worldview shapes so much of who you are and how you interpret the lives of others. I do think all three of these factions would absolutely work well together, right? If there's a big enough threat, who cares about where you came from or who you take orders from? We have to fight. On the other hand, given enough politicking and bad deals and unfulfilled oaths and mercenary work that's dubious, I can see all three of these trying to fight one another with tensions getting high. But I'd love to hear your thoughts, right? In the comments down below, let me know. Do you have an army of Duardin that mixes together? And if you do, what's your lore for them? Did you write in tensions based on their values and stuff? If you thought I missed anything that would really add to their values and kind of make a big difference to the conversation, let me know. I would love to hear it. But more than anything, I'm just so thankful that you watched this video with me today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in my next Age of Sigmar lore video. Happy wargaming.